last module of the last chapter. We're going to talk about incident response and a little bit in forensics, and I'll put in maybe a little bit of a plug here. If you get interested in forensics, they have a forensics course that you can take that uses EC Counsel's material. And EC Counsel or eCounsel are the people that also do ethical hacker. They do that, and CHFI is the forensics. I think forensics inspector is what it stands for. I've not ever taken that one, so we'll look at some things. I've got one tool we'll take a quick look at, the kind of the stuff that you would do with forensics. It's something that's not going to be particularly easy because it's one that you really do have to piece the little bits together. It's kind of like police detectives trying to figure out a crime when we do that. So we'll talk about how to collect forensics evidence about incidents and then how to respond to an incident. So the steps here: prepare, respond, follow up. Prepare, respond, follow up. And that's going to be the whole thing. Prepare, and hopefully you get the idea. Prepare is the key for all of these things. Prepare what could happen. Is it going to happen? Yeah, probably not. We used to and do all sorts of what-if games, particularly at shore stations. What if this? What if that? We got lucky on one of them. We were doing a what if. We were actually doing an exercise when Hussein invaded Kuwait. That was the logistics exercise we were doing. So we just went from exercise to implementation for those things. But practice, practice, practice for these. And it's something that is a pain to do. Nobody wants to do the exercises. Nobody wants to be disturbed about what's going on. It's just like kind of doing backups. It's something that's got to be done. No fun. You don't get any credit for it. But if you don't have them, you're going to get credit for it. Forensics is applying the science to legal questions, analyzing evidence that can be applied to the technology. And what we're talking about is collecting the evidence and doing analysis of the evidence. Computer forensics uses technology to search the computer for evidence of a crime. Importance of computer forensics is due to the following: the amount of digital evidence, the increasing scrutiny by legal professionals of it, and then the high level of computer skills by criminals. And I guess while we're kind of mentioned that, let me bring this over. I got two tools here we can look at. Here, this one's called Autopsy, which is free if you want to download it and play with it. And we'll start out with a new case, and then some of this stuff hopefully is going to show up when we get into the, if it'll talk to me. Maybe it's not. Here we go. New case. So first we have a case number. One of the things that's going to become key in these is going to be chain of evidence. And who did it? What's their competency? The people that are defending whoever you're accusing are going to try to make it so that you are not capable of doing these things. So we do this, and then any notes, you got the name, the examiner, the phone number, the email, and any notes that you have for this. So we'll do a finish here. And then it's creating the database. These tools are not particularly fast when we look at them. And it's being particularly slow. Now it's creating the text index of what's going on. We're going to get the information that's there, and it's important to do these things. So what we can do, if it ever gets to where it's loaded up, and you get kind of the sense of how much time it takes. We'll add the source. Then I'll open one of the cases and we can look at the case, because it takes a little bit of time, obviously, for it to do all of these things. And it really didn't take that much. There we go. So we can look at a disk image, and I'm going to show you an imaging software here in a second. The local disk, logical files. If we look at a local disk, we'll look at one here. The local disk, and I've got a Yeah, I've got a USB drive here, because it shouldn't take that long to look at this one. So we can do that, and we'll just go next. What are we looking at? Keyword email parser, all the different elements that are available in it. So we can next on it, and starting to ingest, and it's getting the information. What this thing should eventually come up with, yeah, system files, all files, deleted files if nothing else. And I had a folder, and these in fact are deleted files that are over here on this flash drive. It will look at that, extracted contacts, look at some metadata on the G drive. So we can look at files, and what we're generally going to be looking at on these things is going to be files or fragments that go through here. Let me look at this one. Let's see if it says it's still running. Yeah, let's close the case, and it'll probably crash on me. But it's opening this file, I hope, which is an image of the flash drive before I did anything with it. And we did have some, look down here, we have some information on it before. It was NTFS. I just formatted it, got a boot manager, so there is some information on this drive that was available before I did any of those other things. We got the views here, the data source, the G drive. These are things that might be hidden files, and that's the kind of things that these tools can do for you. Look for fragments that the bad guys left on the system. Let me get out of this one, or try to get out of this one, or at least minimize it. The other one is the FTK Imager, which is also free, and it may take a little bit of time to start. What you can, we'll just look at some things. We got a file here, add attached file, all evidence, create a disk image, capture memory. And one of the things we're going to say is, hey, we need to image things. You don't work on the device that's been compromised. If you have a hard drive, you're going to capture an image. So this one we can create a disk image, and it does take some time. It took like, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes for that, and I think it's a 7 gig flash drive. It's got like nothing on it. It has 4 or 5 files, or a dozen files maybe. So it's going to be something that is not going to be all that fast when you look at it, when you do it. Let's see, capture memory, obtain protected files. So we have the ability to image memory as well as to image the disks themselves. And I put a link to a video, and it's in Autopsy, in the secplusldc.blogspot.com, of a demo, a pretty good demo on what a guy did with Autopsy and the FTK Imager. One of the things that he's got in there that could be really kind of important is to make a change to the registry so that you can't write back to the information. That obviously can cause some issues with the whole thing. So let's go back to this one. I just want to look at the tools. If it'll open, I just want to look at the tools list here, show you them, and then we'll get back to the PowerPoints. Opening all of this good stuff, and the text file. Now we can look at one of those too. But the tools here: timeline, run, the module, generator, report, and then different plugins that are available. And I don't have any, and I don't have any added for those things, but there are other tools: images and videos, communications, timeline. These things will look at, as long as you got all the plugins, again, which I don't, a lot of information on the disk or in the memory of the system itself. And again, just that, yeah, these were there. This is an image after I formatted the disk. That's what was left over on the disk itself, even after it had been formatted. So some tools that you may want to get and play with. There are a lot of tools that you may want to get and play with as you go forward into the into IT. All of the things that are available to you. The importance to do the following: the amount of digital evidence, and without tools like that, the amount of digital evidence is going to be pretty significant. How do we get to all of it? How do we actually manage the things that we need to manage in the systems? So we have those kinds of issues. I just look in here to see. Let me get the attendance done. Get GIP in here and Quanterius. So, importance for these things, and there is a lot of it, and the computer skills of the people that are doing the attacking, they're really there. I talked about that before you even touch the system. You put the right blocker on, it's actually, and if you watch the video, he shows you which registry key to add in order to do that. The first thing you need is an image, but what you don't want to happen is for your imaging file or your imaging software to be able to write back to the disk. And that was a question from Quanterius. Don't you need a write blocker? Yeah, I'm just showing you some of the tools that you can use for these things. The ones that were in a autopsy was an image that we had to look at it. You can look at the live, but you shouldn't, because then you can't present it as complete because you may have made changes to it. But yeah, you do need a write blocker so that you're not making changes, inadvertent changes to the disk itself. Any changes are going to make the evidence not acceptable to the system. The basic forensic procedures, and again, we're not making you forensic experts or forensics techs, I guess would be the word. They do have a course where you can take for that. 4 basic steps: secure the crime scene, collect the evidence, establish a chain of custody. Chain of custody, you'll hear chain of custody, chain of custody, chain of custody, because you have to have that. It's just like everything else, what you see on all of the detective shows and the trial shows that on TV. They have a chain of custody where whoever handles the evidence signs for it from one to the other. And then examine the crime scene for evidence. Do we have any? And these are when you can, I guess, kind of take your time and not rush into something and damage something, like right back to the hard drive. Like, be sure that you're using an image and not the device itself. One of the shows, somebody went in and did something, and it was impractical because the FBI let her go in and look at the hard drive. She took a script that her friend had given her in there, and they destroyed the evidence. They're not going to let you look at the physical hard drive, and you shouldn't be looking at the hard drive. You should be looking at an image of the hard drive. First thing we need to do is image, and imaging software is going to be required in order to do that. Secure the crime scene, preserve the evidence, damage control steps taken to minimize the loss of evidence. We're presuming right now that there's not an attack that's in progress, that the damage has been done, and now we're looking for evidence, and the evidence that we're looking for is to be able to prosecute whoever inflicted this on us. Secure the crime scene. After the response team arrives, and the response team is, I guess we'll have another slide on that, something that you do need. And in the response team, you need all sorts of individuals, including the technical individuals. But you may need some legal people there too. What can you do? What can't you do? What kind of advice do you need on those sorts of things? So the first job, secure the crime scene, includes physical surroundings are documented. Photographs are a great way to do this. Photographs taken before anything is touched. The cables need to be labeled. The team is going to take custody of the computer and then interview the witnesses. The length of time that's passed since the initial incident should be noted. And that's going to be based on whoever observed, obviously, the initial incident for these things. Preserve the evidence. Digital evidence is fragile. Any digital is fragile to the point it can be easily altered or destroyed. Computer forensics team captures the volatile data. The stuff that's in RAM is going to be the first that will disappear, and you need to capture the data in the order of volatility. We'll have a second slide on that shows the order that they should be captured in. The example of contents are RAM, current network connections. Order of volatility has got to be followed to preserve the most fragile data first. The memory is going to be the first thing to go because we have to have power on the system in order to do that. Memory may not last forever. It has to have something to hold that information in place. Capture the entire system image. Mirror the image. Back up the hard drive. That meets the evidence standards. Something that you're using meets the evidence standard. The tools that you use are going to have to meet the standard required in order to present this in court. Forensic evidence, RFC 3227 is the governing document for these things. Evidence admissible in court, got to have a chain of custody. Testimony, sworn statement, can be oral or written. Real evidence, a physical object relevant to the case. Demonstrative evidence, representation of an object or event, photos, audio, video, models. We see those, a computer model of what happened here and what happened there, and then I guess the TV shows, the things that they do, the angles of the wounds and those sorts of things, where could it have come from. Digital evidence recorded in a digital format, video, audio, email, backup, stored on a computer. And again, some of it's going to be hidden, some is going to be an attempt to have been hidden. Deleted. Files have been deleted. Files are there that, maybe shouldn't be there. Emails may be there. One of the things that autopsy can look for is emails. It can look for images. It can look for all the files. It will index the files for you, and that's why it was taking so long, is to index the files for you so that you can go by file type. The collecting of evidence, secure access to the system and the data. Access, if necessary, access evidence through e-discovery. And e-discovery is somebody else may have it. And this may need a legal hold, depends on how long it's going to take you to get the evidence. And the legal hold keep people from destroying or changing the evidence. Classified by order of volatility. Memory, swap files, firmware, archives. Over on the right. CPU, cache, and register content and routing tables, ARP cache, process tables, kernel statistics are all going to be the most volatile. They're going to be the ones that are most likely to go away. Some of these things we talk about, CPU obviously doesn't keep things very long. ARP cache, times out. Memory, temporary file system, swap space are the next most volatile, I guess, things. And then the least volatile are data on disk, remotely logged data, and then raw disk blocks. So things that are actually physically stored on a physical device. Capture the evidence, log screenshots, forensic backup tools, time offsets, and their witnesses. Time offsets, if we have information from multiple sources, then what is the time offset, so that we can bring them in, is basically bringing them in all to the same time zone, the offsets, so that we know what's there. Take hashes, and the hashes are the things that are going to allow you to prove that you didn't make any changes. Because remember, a hash, any change, any minor change is going to cause a major change in the hash. So we need to take hashes, analyze the data, and then assemble the findings when you do those things. And these are going to be, relatively large documents when we do those things. And one of the things that I didn't do while we were over here, and let me see if I can find one, is these things, these cases, produce text documents along with them. Now, just looking at it, I don't see them easily here, but they produce a folder for each of the cases that we have. I guess I could produce a report, which I didn't do for those things. Forensics, establish a chain of custody. Document the evidence was maintained under strict control at all times. Who had access to it? And that's to prove that we didn't change it, and that it was only authorized users. No authorized person was given the opportunity to corrupt the evidence for those things. Examine evidence, examine for evidence. An expert searches the documents, looking for specific documents, looking for maybe portions of documents. They may be fragments. Are we looking for a virus? What are we looking for? And that's where the indexing of the software is in Autopsy, just a free one that was easy to get and easy to install. Most forensic tools are going to be, as well as all of these tools, are going to be Linux based. There are a lot more tools available, security tools available for Linux than there are Windows. One of the things that when you get into wireless systems, Linux is the only one that can put a wireless NIC into the mode where we can see everything. So Windows can't do that. Windows page files can provide investigative leads, and then RAM, slack, and metadata are additional sources of hidden data. RAM slack is kind of in an area, it's RAM that really doesn't have, that's not being used completely, that may have something hidden in it. And these are the things that we want to do. Promiscuous mode was the word that I couldn't think of. That only for wireless Linux, you need a Linux if you're going to use promiscuous mode, which would allow you to see everything. The incident response team, the people that we're going to have, leadership, skill, and authority in the organization. And whoever's in charge of this thing may not be a technical individual, but they need to be able to speak to authority, I guess, is there, to interact with authority, so that not only keep them up to date, but to get quick permissions to do certain things, or to get people that you need, the technical support that you need, maybe money you need, added to the investigation that you're doing. Technical knowledge could have a lot of people with specialized fields in here, and then security principles, recognize attacks and use the forensic principles. Human resources often involve employee actions. What are we going to do with the employee? What can we do? What are the alternatives for these things? A legal advisor, policy questions, larger scale events, and again, what's legal and what's not legal. What can you do? How far can you go with these things? Communications. Somebody and a single individual will be the spokesperson. Reduces the confusion. And then the first responders, the first ones on the scene that do all of the things that we talked about a little earlier, they're going to secure the machine. They're going to take evidence. They're going to do the forensics investigation, the first responders for these things. First responders are going to be the first people on the scene when we do those things. First experienced person or team of trained professionals who arrive on the scene of the incident. Just like first responders, when we have an accident or an illness or something like that, the first responders, who's going to get there first? Who's going to take the initial actions to maybe stop the attack if it's an attack in progress, and secure? Don't let anybody, we'll say, don't let anybody do anything stupid to destroy evidence or to destroy the ability to collect evidence. The response process: preparation, identification, containment, investigation, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. So preparation, tools and training, that we have the first responders, that we have the response team, that we have the tools available that we need for these things. Detect the event, the nature and the severity of the event. Containment, stop the damage. If it's something that's ongoing, and if it's a hacker on the system, you want to observe as much as possible, but you also don't want any further damage to happen. You don't want any more damage to your network. So containment may be as simple as unplugging the NIC, but documentation. When did you do that? At what point did you do those things? And when you start this, you got to start with the documentation. Investigate the effects and root causes. How did this happen, and what are the effects? And you may not know all of them immediately. A lot of effects, impacts can show up later, and we may not have gotten everything. We may still have something on the network itself. Eradication, eliminate the root cause, and then recovery, restore the services. And after that, lessons learned. We always have lessons learned, but lessons learned should become part of the training process, because how did this happen? Why did this happen? So what steps can we take to prevent this from happening again in the systems? Preparing for these things, develop policies and checklists. And again, there are a number of places that you can get templates for the policies and checklists. What are we going to do? What's the situation? What kind of checklist that will we do? Document expected incident types and categories, and we've looked at some of the kinds of processes for other things that we can use for that. How we're going to protect the resources, checklist sort of things. But what kind of incidents might happen? What are the categories? Maintain a disaster recovery plan, which we talked about last night. Disaster recovery plan is in fact a disaster. It's not a hard drive died. It is that we have some big time issues with it. Choose, train the response team. And they need to know that and when you choose, it's not like, oh yeah, you're going to be on it. You do need to have training for these folks. Who has what responsibilities? Who has what tools? Who's going to bring what to the incident? Depending on what kind of incident, people may have different jobs in each of those. Ensure that the team has sufficient authority. And that's part of who's going to lead the team. What kind of authority are they going to have? Equip the team with the tools that they need. Educate other employees and users. One, that you have a team, educate them on how to avoid the need for the team. And then monitor system events. So the incident response, using an organized methodology to address and manage security breaches and attacks, limit the damage, reduce recovery costs. Preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. Going around here, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and then post-incident activity. There may be multiple steps required for each of these things when they do those. Preparation, establish the foundation for effecting incident response. Organizational policy, response plan, and a strategy. Formation of a communications plan, establishment of documentation requirements. Incident response team, ensure that they have the necessary access and resources, and educate the incident response team and the other staff. So you get an idea that there's a whole lot of paperwork involved in IT. There is a whole lot of paperwork involved. There's some mystery solving involved in it also, but the preparation, the policies, the checklists, the documenting, the installations, the wiring diagrams, rack diagrams, all sorts of things that you may need. And documentation really is a key. And I am one of the first to admit I'm not real good at documentation. I took over from a guy one time who was really good at documentation, and man, it makes the job a lot easier. When you go, so-and-so's got a problem with this, go fix it. You go look at the documents and you look exactly what you need is there. So when you're doing these things, think about that, not only for you, but for whoever's going to come after you, because you're probably not going to stay in these jobs forever. Incidents, multiple sources, and identifying that you have had an incident can be an issue in itself. And I've talked about some of these. A lot of these major hacks, and the one that I know specifically was Home Depot. A lot of these major hacks, it's a long time before the companies knew that they had been compromised. So a lot of information went away. The multiple sources, the IDS, the logs, whatever is available to you. I mean, one of the things may be scanning your system from the outside. Are some odd ports open? It's like, okay, we have this running and that running, and I expect this port, but where did that one come from? Things like that. Just maintaining, I guess, a vigilance, staying alert to what's going on with the system. Kind of like what we talked about with the movie that we were watching. It was just simply a matter of watching that something was odd with the data, the bandwidth usage going out of the activity. Like, okay, something's wrong here. Now you can look further at these things. You need keys to doing it. Examine anything unusual. Log files, config files, unusual or normal, what's going on. And what's going on or what's wrong, it may not be immediately obvious, but you need to keep digging until you find out what's causing this anomaly. Why do we have this strange action? Why do we have this strange amount of activity? And we used to, and it was students, we knew who it was. We would get sometimes, we get big print jobs in the middle of the night. 2 o'clock in the morning you get a print job. That's pretty unusual, especially when most people didn't time it. Most of the employees at least didn't time them to do that. Good time to print if you have big jobs, but these weren't. And now you've got to go back and see where these things are coming from. What kind of indicators do you have? The nature. What do we have? Unauthorized access, theft, data breach, vandalism, malware, denial of service. What's the issue? What's the problem with it? Evaluate the scope, severity, what's affected. Is it critical? Is the risk still there? And this is the attack in progress. How far do we let it go? What is the risk? Has all the damage been done that's going to be done to the systems? Escalate the incident appropriately. The initial team, or I don't have enough people, or we need more help. Escalate if you need to do that. The detection and analysis, this is the same cycle that we had: preparation, detection, containment, eradication, post-incident. So detection and analysis, identify deviations from normal operations, and that's what some of our detective software is for. the IPSs and the IDSs can look for, if we have them trained as to what's normal, they can look for abnormal activity. Establishment of baselines and identify resources that indicate the deviation. Compare the deviation to the established metrics. Notification of the incident response team, establishment of communication channel, selection of incident handlers, and then ensuring that the handlers document the detection process and that they use appropriate tools. And we'll go back to Quanterius' comment that first thing you need to do is block your ability to write to the system so that you can't make changes to it, any change at all, and whoever is defending whomever gets accused is going to say that that evidence is no longer valid. Containing the incidents, shut down the affected services or systems, quarantine the systems, allowing the systems to operate but directly monitor. This is one of the attacks in progress. We want to see what's going on. Temporary repairing vulnerabilities, securing related or vulnerable assets, and then bringing backup systems online. So contain the incident. If it's really bad, shut down the system. You're going to lose some evidence, obviously. You're going to lose all of the volatile evidence. You're going to lose the memory. You're going to use what's in the CPU. You're going to lose all the cache. You'll still have the hard drive, but you're going to lose a lot of evidence. But it may be necessary to prevent damage to the network. Quarantine the affected system. Isolate it from everything else. Might be as simple as unplugging the NIC. Allowing the affected systems to operate but directly monitor. It's already done the damage, not doing any more damage. We'll watch what goes on, and if we get to the point that we think we're about to have further damage, then we'll pull the plug on it. Temporary repairing vulnerabilities. How did it get in? And then that securing related or vulnerable assets. Once you've figured out how they got in, are your other systems vulnerable? Do they have the same vulnerabilities? Then we need to fix those vulnerabilities and bring the backup systems online. And this, obviously, presuming that we've done some of the steps that we talked about last night, to have the backup systems, to have those that we can use for these things. Containment. The objective is to limit losses, prevent further damage. Short-term containment, network isolation, backups to create duplicates of the critical systems. Long-term containment may be taking the systems offline for repair, or long-term containment is taking the systems offline for repair. Investigation, we need to have some idea of what happened. Thorough investigation, solve the problems, gather the evidence, written documentation, notes, what goes on. And when we looked at the autopsy software, when we started the case, and each element of evidence, and you can put the case in and add different elements to it, was comments. Who did it? So that you can prove the competency, and then any comments along with the identification of whoever is doing that particular portion of the investigation. Gather evidence, written documentation. If there are consequences, treat it as forensic evidence. And then e-discovery here is sharing electronic forensics. ID, secure and analyze with the intent to use with criminal proceedings. So sharing, as well as the earlier one, it may be somebody else has it when we do that. And they may not be cooperative, and that's what the legal hold was about, to keep them from destroying, modifying the evidence before we had a chance to look at it. Investigating what needs to be collected, information placed on legal hold. Legal hold is a legal technique to preserve the data. Secure physical and remote access. Document the scene as found. Known changes made during the containment. forensic backup software to preserve the information and verify information. Verify information will answer the questions later. Secure confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity of the findings. One of the things that can become an issue when you're in the middle of one of these things, trying to drain the swamp, is how do you maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity of what's going on? And you still got to do that to the maximum degree possible when we do those things. Preservation of the data, again, LegalHo here, designed to preserve all relevant information when litigation is reasonably expected to occur. The LegalHo. Receipt of the LegalHo down here, the detailed description of the scope of preserved information. Data custodian must preserve and protect the data. Can encompass paper documents and electronic information. Preservation of the information. Acknowledge receipt of the LegalHo, current and future information subject to the hold, and maintain a repository for the electronic information. The audit trail must be verifiable. Forensic data has got to be verifiable. Locate and analyze sources and monitor with compliance with a hold and automatically log all relevant audit trail information. Anybody that looks at it, anybody that handles it's got to be logged in as doing that. Chain of custody, handling from collection to presentation in court to disposal. You have to sign for it, but you have to, not basically, you got to sign for it, acknowledge receipt of it each step along the way. Anybody that handles the data has to do that. Collection, analysis, story, presentation in court, up until it is disposed of, and whoever disposes of it has to sign that they did that. And you get into some of these cases that, yeah, well, we decided that, it'd be better to keep it or whatever, but we signed that we disposed of it anyway. That is something that obviously can become an issue with these things. Clean up the damage. Repair or replace the damaged hardware. Remove the infected software from it. Remove the infected software, replace the password, other credentials, restore the systems, restore the network structure, harden the network against recurrence, updates and patches, which we should have been doing in the first place. Disable unnecessary services, all the things that we talked about earlier that we're going to do. We're going to update, we're going to patch, we're going to disable the unnecessary services. We're going to revise the configuration files if necessary, access control lists, and we could have checked all of that before. What goes on, what didn't go on, what changed or didn't change with the system. And then notify the relevant personnel. Eradication, remove or restore the affected systems. Return the systems to operation, steps to return to operation, implementation, additional security controls, and then update the incident documentation. So we had eradication, remove or restore the affected system, return the system to operation, additional security controls, and then update the incident documentation. Create restoring the service, a restoration plan. Certify restored systems are operational and secure after we've removed whatever caused the issue. Certify that it is good. This may be, it depends on what it is. This may be an issue of re-imaging or reinstalling, wiping it out and starting from scratch. If it's a workstation, that's probably what you're going to do. If it's a server, may not be as easy as doing that. You may have to go through the server and find all of the leftovers that go there. That's what happened. I'll go back. That's what happened to us with the I Love Me virus. We had damage throughout the server, and it was a matter of going meticulously, painfully through the system and finding out where the damage was and trying to fix that. And formally restore the services, Continue monitoring. Continue monitoring. Did we really get everything? Was there something there that was, sleeping, waiting to activate on the system? Recovery. Bring the affected system back into production environment. Time frame for operations to be restored. Testing tools and measures to ensure that it's functional, and the time frame for monitoring the system for anomalies. How long are we going to watch it after we bring it back online? The lessons learned phase, the extent of the incident, the scope, cost, and duration. Was the response adequate? Was the preparation sufficient? Detection timely. Communications and documentation thorough and clear. And prevention. What can we do to prevent future episodes of this thing? Education, policies, security measures. What is required in order to prevent those kinds of things? Because obviously we don't want them going on in the systems, because it costs time, costs money, may cost reputation when we look at those things. So the lessons learned portion, meeting with the response team and management, finalize the incident timeline, identification of problem and scope of the steps taken to mitigate it, effectiveness of the team, and plan what are the needs for improvement and the completion of the documentation. And then we should go back to preparation. And I think preparation and training for this, because after the incident, training on what can be done, obviously, to prevent it from happening in the future. So the slide has kind of got some detail, I guess. The phases: prepare, critically conduct a critical assessment for your organization. Criticality, that's it. Criticality assessment. Carry out cybersecurity threat analysis, realistic scenarios and rehearsals. Implications of people, process, technology, information. Create appropriate control framework. Review your state of readiness, and then respond to the cybersecurity incident. Identify the incident. Define the objective. Investigate the situation. Take the appropriate action. Recover the system, data, and connectivity. And then in the follow-up, investigate more thoroughly. Report the incident to relevant shareholders. And that's something that's not always easy to do, because it's like, why did this happen? And then it's, how could you let that happen, sort of thing. Carry out the incident review, communicate, build on lessons, update key information, and then perform trend analysis. And then we'll start all over again with the prepare element.